Greetings, ghosts and ghouls, and welcome to Bad Boo, a podcast conjured for the curious where we explore all things frights, flicks, and folklore.
We are your haunting hosts, Sam and Jodie, guiding you through every episode of occult exploration and holding your hand the whole way through.
So if you like the sound of spooks, screams, and symphonies, keep listening as we unravel our mystic matter for this week.
In today's episode, we'll be skipping merrily into the dark origins of fairy tales and the twisted fates that they teach you.
I've been so excited for this episode.
Me too. I've been really interested to see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, ever since we came out with the idea of doing the fairy tales as an episode, it's like, oh yes, this is kind of where my head's at.
But as we usually do, in order to figure out where we need to start, we need to understand what a fairy tale is.
Absolutely. So a fairy tale is described as essentially just being a short story that primarily belongs into folklore as a genre as a whole. While the name completely suggests the presence of fairies from its name, the definition centres more upon the story's content and its structure. So, you know, they often feature like magic and enchantments and mythical or fanciful beings like fairies, like we said, and of course like trolls and witches and talking animals and giants, etc. You know, there's a vast, you know, when you think of fairy tales, you think of a vast number of magical creatures.
Yeah, everything magical and
stories.
mystical.
Yeah, and the stories are typically set within quite a vague past, and often start with the classic phrase like "once upon a time." You know,
the genre-defining line, that is.
The absolute genre-defining line, and it usually takes place in a world without like a definite, specific location or historical grounding. Because while it's relatable and you can identify like certain semiotics and signs within, you know, whether it's a visual one or an illustrative book, you can't really pinpoint when it's set.
No, it's usually just like a castle in the woods or just
a forest, you know,
or a castle.
So it's very, very much fantastical.
Yeah.
And, you know, regard to characters, you know, they're very much archetypal. So they're often very simple and serve a purpose. So there'll be like the innocent hero / heroine, the wicked stepmother, or the handsome prince, are like the typical kind of where these sort of character tropes come from, and obviously they've seeped their way into film and Hollywood.
Yeah, like prince, princess,
exactly,
dragon type thing.
Exactly.
Which is a clue to later on in this episode. Actually,
absolutely.
Maybe we'll be encountering a dragon of our own.
Oh, perhaps so. Keep an eye on the old Instagram for that one at Bad Boo Productions. But these characters are often characterized by a single defining trait. So for example, if we're talking about Snow White skin, you know, she's as pale as snow. That's what she's described as being. So the plot usually revolves around a central problem or a conflict that must be solved through a sequence of events, and they often involve like impossible tasks or tests for our characters within obviously traditionally books. So that is sort of the grounding general term for a fairy tale and what it is and what it embodies. Yeah,
which I'm pretty sure everybody has a kind of natural grasp of anyway. I feel like fairy tales are the first stories that people truly get told, because it's like what you teach to a kid, right?
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's your little bedtime stories before you go to sleep every night is a fairy tale usually.
Yeah. I mean, they've got like their moral compass and their own sort of purpose, and I think it's often where a lot of societal you know, traits and cultural, you know, culture, I suppose, within like Europe specifically really derives from.
Yeah, 100%.
And behaviours, you know, sort of learnt behaviours and learnt things from when you're young. But we'll go into that obviously soon.
But before we do go into more about what the actual stories are teaching you, we kind of need to understand where they come from first, right?
Absolutely.
And generally speaking, the genre as we recognise it today has basically formed itself around oral traditions where people have spoken these stories for centuries and centuries before they were finally written down. And some of the earliest literary adaptations came from the Renaissance period, where writers like, bear with me on the pronunciations because I'm going to have to do an Italian accent slightly because of their names, Giambattista Basile with Il Pentamarone, which was in 1636, and Giovanni Francesco Straparola with La Piacevoli Noti in the 16th century. Excuse the pronunciation on all of those.
That was amazing.
But I hope you understand that the accent was very important. But these were some of the first reworked versions of these stories that had actually been written down properly. After this, there was then the coined term of fairy tale that came from aristocrats in the 17th century. And it kind of circulated more in France with this name, where it was called a conte de fées or conte de filles. I'm not quite sure on that again. I did do French for 3 years at GCSE level, but I haven't done it in about 10 years now.
There we go.
Yeah, but that was around in 1697. So just at the end of the 17th century. And that was actually kind of created by a lady called Madame d'Aulnoy.
So these stories became very fashionable parlour games amongst the French aristocracy. So Charles Perrault's Histories, or de Contes du Passé, in 1697 fixed the form of the now famous tales like Cinderella and Little Red Riding Hood.
The classics.
So these early literary versions were often quite violent and sexual, which were intended for an adult audience, which, if you didn't know that, that's probably quite a shock when you think about fairy tales
really
being for
interesting because
children, usually. But
yeah,
initially, no.
I
They're
always
very
thought
much
they were
adult content.
children's stories.
Oh dear.
Hmm.
So, obviously, a lot of you probably heard of the Brothers Grimm.
If you haven't heard of the Brothers Grimm, where have you been?
I'll tell you who will know about it is your nan.
Yes.
Go and ask her. So this was in the 19th century, where Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm published their collection, Children's and Household Tales, which started in 1812, and they aimed to preserve like German folklore, but their later editions were heavily edited and progressively sanitized to become more suitable for children, which solidified the more modern image of the fairy tale.
Which is what we tell our bedtime stories.
It is.
Yeah.
And even the children's ones do scare children, I find. Especially Red Riding Hood, that was always one that stuck with me.
Yeah, me too. It was always the kind of
wolf.
scarier one out of all of them to be told, I think.
See, Red Riding Hood's nan. Look what happened.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Beware of your nans.
Yeah. I mean, we'll be going into a little bit more of Red Riding Hood later on in the
I thought
episode.
you were going to say that we're going a little bit more into nans in this episode, and I was like, are we?
Are we? So yeah, we'll be going a little bit more into the old Red Riding Hood later on in the episode, so stay tuned for that. So obviously we just talked about the origins of fairy tales and where they come from.
Yeah.
But, you know, we'll talk about now the most famous fairy tales.
The OGs.
The OGs during this time. So the themes and the core plots of the many popular fairy tales, like your Cinderella and like your Beauty and the Beast.
The classics.
Like your Beauty and the Beast.
The classics.
Are much older than any surviving written text. And research suggests that some of these oral stories date back thousands of years, potentially to the Bronze Age in Indo-European cultures. And,
I mean, I failed history, but from watching a few episodes of Horrible Histories and from the little bit of research that we did before this, for those of you that don't know, Indo-European cultures was basically just before the Iron Age, so just before the 1200s, where about 40% of the world's population spoke the same language. Across Europe in particular, so it's that language that it's talking about, saying that these stories derived from there.
So the Bronze Age was pretty much the segue between the Stone Age and the Iron Age.
Yeah, and just from a quick little look that we did, it's between 3,300 BC all the way up to 1200 BC.
That's a long time ago.
A long old time ago. But we're talking like mud huts and like
your classic dirt house in Minecraft.
Dirt houses, hay roofs, all these types of things. So it was a long ass time ago.
It's a very long time ago.
like crazy long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But it was also in that period that we were talking about where religion and folklore was so important to people, because that was all the communication that they had was word of mouth.
Yeah,
So that's where all of these stories have come from.
absolutely.
And some of the earliest iterations of these folklore type stories, one of the earlier ones being Cupid and Psyche, which was written by Apuleius in his work of The Golden Ass, which is an actual book, by the way. Yes, we researched
The
it.
Golden Ass.
And it dates back to the 2nd century CE, so the Roman era, essentially. And it's often cited as the oldest surviving narrative that closely resembles a modern fairy tale, because it features a similar structure of having trials, supernatural interference, and then a final union in the story.
So that is your kind of general fairy tale structure that we're used to. So that was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously we then had the Panchatantra, which is a collection of Sanskrit beast fables from India, and it's estimated to have been composed around 200 BCE. While primarily fables which were meant to teach political wisdom, these stories travelled widely and influenced later European culture and folklore.
So it's saying that the beast fairy tales were basically all the way from India, and they've gone into Europe.
It doesn't surprise me of India sort of, with their animals and stuff that they sort of talk about in their religion and culture.
Well, I feel like, don't get me wrong, I'm no historian or geologist at all, but I feel like when you look into the kind of backdated history of all of these cultures, particularly in Asia, I feel like their mystical aspects go back a lot further than what they do in European cultures.
Oh, 100%.
You know what I mean? When you think of the samurai and them kind of being seen as demons or ghosts of the night and things like that.
The samurai, and also you have Indian, the classic sort of monkeys and stuff that they kind of worship and stuff. And
exactly. I feel like it's because they're a much more kind of closer to their gods. Yeah. Kind of.
I think in modern terms, they are very much still are. Yeah. They're sort of not as atheist, I suppose, as European cultures are. I suppose that's quite an interesting perspective, really.
Yeah, and it's interesting how it's come from that side of the world where those beliefs were so much, I won't say stronger because I don't feel like that is the word, but where they were so much more prevalent in society.
Yeah, 100%.
And there was a lack of questioning. Yeah. I feel like that's where it's really interesting that these fables have come from there as well.
Of course it is, yeah.
It's just influenced so much stuff around the world, and I would have never have thought that fairy tales would have derived from India of all places, especially the beastly ones.
The beastly ones, yeah, that's sort of the monsters and the creatures and stuff. But the genre as a distinct literary form began to emerge during the Renaissance and solidified in the 17th century. So you had texts like we mentioned earlier, like Il Pentamerone, which is by Giambattista Basile, which is in 1634, where this collection of Italian tales contains some of the earliest known literary versions of stories that are later become famous. So there'll be some here that I'm about to list that don't sound anything like their ones that they're known as today. Yeah. So this includes Sun, Moon, and Talia, which is a precursor to Sleeping Beauty, and Petrosinella, which is a precursor to Rapunzel, which is really cool.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Some really, really old sort of text back in the 1600s.
It's so interesting how everything just derives from earlier things. None of these fairy tales that we have kind of come up with. I always thought that they were they're just modern stories that people came up with to keep children entertained. But the fact that it goes back so far and it's just been changed and tweaked and translated is so interesting, and it gives all of these childhood films and childhood stories so much more depth because they actually have historical backing now. Do you know what I mean?
This is crazy.
We even have the, again, pronunciation, excuse me, Histoires ou contes de temps passé by,
Very good.
thank you, by Charles Perrault in 1697. We did briefly mention it in the past one.
We did.
And often it's called Tales of the Mother Goose, but that's generally considered the foundation for modern literacy fairy tale books.
Yeah.
Essentially, and the entire genre. And that's because that was the fixed and almost popularized version of stories like Cinderella, Little Red Riding Hood, and even Puss in Boots, as that's where those original aristocratic ones were written in France.
Yeah, for the adult audience.
Yeah, and this was the instance where they were changed into those slightly more PG versions.
Yeah. It's gone from an adult version popularised by Perrault into being one of Shrek's companions.
Yeah.
So there we go.
Gotta love Shrek. Shrek is love, Shrek is life.
If you don't, you need to stop listening to this podcast. So, obviously, as we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of purposes behind the fairy tales and what they do.
Because they aren't just for kids, as we've very much discovered.
So originally, these tales were often told to adults and to the whole family, so not just children, because life was harsh, as it is still, but in a much different way.
Yeah.
And mortality rates, especially child mortality, were high, and the stories reflected this brutality in a very honest way.
Yeah.
So going through some of their purposes, it was often seen as a warning system. So the dark, gruesome elements served as a stark warning about the real world dangers of the time that they're written in, essentially. And they're very timeless as well.
They are really
find.
Timeless. The world is still a very dangerous place, unfortunately. It's always going to be like that as long as people are around, I suppose.
It is. I mean, it kind of reminds me of biblical texts and stuff. Sort of as a moral compass.
Yeah.
I find that fairy tales sort of try and offer the similar type of message of saying these are the moral things, but more in a warning way rather than this is how to be moral type thing. So, for instance, Little Red Riding Hood wasn't just about a girl and a wolf. The wolf was symbolized as the danger or the stranger danger or even sexual predators, which using the symbolism of being devoured to warn young girls specifically against naivety in the time, which is quite an important way of doing it. And I think it's quite an interesting way of saying, they're dangerous people out there, especially to young girls. Do not listen to people you do not know. It's very, very, very important. So I think that was quite a powerful story,
especially back in the 12th century and the 11th century and before that, where it was commonly boys that would go and do farming with their fathers, or they would be hunting or things like that, and it would often be the girl who would be running errands at home whilst the mother was tending to the house. So to be wary of these things, obviously if someone goes missing back then, they just go missing. There's no way of saying this person did it. There's no judge, jury, and executioner.
No.
Well, I mean, there very much was an executioner, but not for the reasons that you would expect. But there were warnings that needed to be put in place, and this seemed like the easiest way to do so.
Yeah, sort of embodied it in sort of a way that would make people, and children believe it. I mean, alongside this, there are obviously other stories, so the notorious Hansel and Gretel, which had a cannibalistic witch, as we all know. Which taught the severe consequences of wandering off or disobeying your elders in some regards. So if you're a child and you're kind of very, very, you're going to be adventurous, you're going to be kind of thinking, you're wanting to see the world. It's basically saying, listen to the adults that know about the dangers of the world and do not just go wandering off because you do not know who you're going to encounter.
I also kind of feel in a weird way, the story of Hansel and Gretel kind of nowadays translates to the if a man tells you to get in his van because he's got sweets, don't get in his van.
It's the same concept.
Yeah.
That's why it's so timeless.
Yeah, it's just it's just the same story being updated every single time.
It is, and that's why they're timeless, because it's outlining parts of human nature and human, like, the bad side of humans.
Mm-hmm.
And because that's so natural, having such a good and a bad side of people, it's going to be timeless.
Yeah.
So that's why these stories never die out, because the same people exist throughout forever, and they have done in history.
But by telling these stories, they did enforce norms amongst society, basically. So it meant that having these villains receive horrific and, like, violent punishments. So, for example, the stepsisters in Cinderella having their eyes pecked out.
That's just crazy.
Which is in the very, very original version. Obviously, there are other versions where they actually cut off their toes to have their feet fit in the slippers. That was the one that I knew about. But they have quite gruesome punishments that are associated with them. And so that's where the tales provided a sense of vicarious justice, and they reinforce the expected social behaviours from kids and also from adults as well.
It's not just
because it's
kids.
like, don't do this, otherwise I'm going to cut your toes off and peck your eyes out.
You've got to think
with a
the
bird.
evil stepsisters in Cinderella weren't children, were they?
No, they
So it
weren't.
could be like directing it at teenagers or siblings or adults.
Yeah.
Jealous adults.
But either way, it meant that at the end of these stories, the good always triumphed over the evil, and it made the harshness of real life slightly more bearable, just because it taught that transgression would eventually be punished, and that there was good to fight for at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. And alongside this, fairy tales were, kind of acted as a psychological outlet to deal with the anxieties of pre-modern life as well. So, like, even the sort of familial tension, so like the common trope of the wicked stepmother, is often argued to reflect that reality, that many children in the sort of earlier centuries were raised by a stepmother due to, like, the high rates of maternal death during childbirth. So these stories allowed the community to discuss sort of very difficult family dynamics through, like, often, like, in a coded, fantastical way.
Which is crazy. It makes a lot of sense, though.
It does. You can see why there's, like, evil stepmother type thing, because of the childbirth sort of thing.
It makes sense. You wouldn't think, like, obviously they probably wouldn't have had the label back in the day of, yes, you are this person's stepmom.
No.
But it's crazy to think, like, of course, if someone's gone and had a child and unfortunately passed away during childbirth, and that same, like, partner was to remarry a woman, and for that woman to look after that child, it is their stepmother. It's just they wouldn't have been called that back in the day. It would have just said, this is your mother.
Yeah, exactly. It's like
even in the film that we watched for this episode,
yes, which we'll go on to in a bit,
the actual mother in the film just preludes to the stepdad as a father
and insists that her daughter calls him
father instead of being a stepfather, because that concept just wasn't really like noted at that time.
No.
So it's interesting to think. I mean, I know it sounds a bit naive, but it makes you actually realise, no, of course, these societal pressures and tensions have been around for centuries now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Down to unfortunate circumstances, and this just made it an easier way to talk about these things and to not make them so taboo anymore.
It is. And obviously there was, like, the political and cultural identity side of their purpose. So, like, collectors like Charles Perrault and the Brothers Grimm began writing them down, where the purpose eventually evolved. So, like, Perrault in the 17th century, like what you said about early, sort of wrote for the French aristocracy, which often used a structure to subtly critique social constraints or to show wit among his peers.
So basically, Perrault just wrote them to be smarter than his friends.
Yeah, just saying, look at me.
Yeah.
And obviously the Grimm brothers within the 19th century, which was their their initial goal really was, like, academic and political, essentially. So to preserve what they saw as an authentic, ancient spirit of, like, the German people in the time of rising nationalism. So these stories therefore were, like, sometimes edited to emphasize folkish ideas, or in some infamous cases to, like, subtly promote nationalist or anti-Semitic ideologies in later politicized editions of the stories.
Yeah, which does especially make sense for 19th century Germany,
Yeah.
of all places. So it's good that as times changed after that those anti-Semitic versions were also changed as well.
Yeah.
And that they've been put into a more modern viewpoint.
And perspective.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And also these stories were just kind of used to talk about things like abandonment and starvation and violence and real issues that people were facing.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't have to be a societal thing. It didn't have to be something political. It didn't have to be like familial.
No.
It was just about these big issues, and where supernatural threats also kind of seemed to loom over people's heads at the time because it was quite a religious setting to be part of. It just meant that when these stories were told and they had the combination of supernatural elements as well as like human elements, it helped to like hone in audiences to process their fears from like a more common place, really, instead of just being scared about everything. And it allowed them to focus that all into energy of stories, so it didn't seem real anymore. And it just gave a safe, contained narrative space where people could be creative about their issues,
100%.
which is really important at the end of the day.
It is very important. Obviously they were not just for their shock value, these tales. It was a reflection of the harsher reality, like we were saying, and very much a crucial sort of mechanism for socialization and cultural transmission.
Yeah.
Which is just really important. So,
and speaking of cultural transmission, we have a little bit of cultural transmission that we need to talk about in our next section. So come with us as we head into the Isle of Fright.
So recently, Jodie and I went to go and visit a little place in Bryston, which is a town / a village, a very small village on the Isle of Wight.
A very pretty village.
Very pretty. Which you'll be able to see on Instagram now.
Mm-hmm.
So go and check it out at Badby Productions. It'll be in the link in the description below if you're interested. But we went to go and visit a very ancient piece of nature, which has very interesting lore behind it, called the Dragon Tree. And we thought that really fit this theme of this week, because it's all to do with fairy tales, all to do with like fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's got a very interesting past. It's not particularly scary, but it's got sort of two contradicting stories behind it. So we want you all to try and figure out which one you think is true.
Now, I know you're probably listening to this and you are thinking, Sam and Jodie, what the hell are you talking about? Again. Because now you're talking about a damn tree. Last time it was a rock.
Now it's a tree.
And now it's a tree.
Yeah.
Well, this isn't just any old tree, okay? This is the Dragon Tree of Bryston, and it is one of the most notable tree-related legends in the entire Isle of Wight and arguably the entirety of the UK.
Yeah.
So it
really is
based on an old oak tree, and it's very important to note that it's an oak tree because there are many famous dragon trees across the world, like the Dracaena Draco, which I believe is somewhere in Eastern Europe. But they all get their name from their red blood resin that trees can secrete, but not from a legend of actually having a dragon attached to the tree itself. So that's
very unique.
Yeah,
very,
it's a
very
little
unique.
differentiation there. This is an oak tree. This isn't from a line of trees that have blood red resin.
Absolutely. So, like we said, it's located in the village of Bryston, which is on the Isle of Wight, like we said. And it stands near the Buddle Brook, which is a stream that historically powered the local mill. So if you go around Bryston, there's many like references to the mill. It's like so mill. It's everywhere, because that was the stream that powered it.
Yeah.
And actually, if you look on our post about the Dragon Tree, you'll see some of the streams. Because I tried getting some of the videos for the stream that powered the mill, and it's quite a strong stream that goes down.
It's a very strong stream.
Obviously, if you go and check it out, so please go and look at the link in the description, because the tree is very famous for its unusual, sprawling shape. And one of its massive low-hanging limbs forms as a natural bridge over the stream, which is really cool. So this distinctive, almost like serpentine growth pattern is what likely sort of inspired or reinforced the legend of the dragon.
And I know you're probably now thinking, what is the legend? Well, I'm about to tell you what the legend is. The local fairy tale surrounding the dragon tree is a classic tale of heroism, and it goes as follows. Legend has it that the tree was once a fearsome dragon that terrorized the villagers of Bryston, when one day a brave knight returning from the Crusades, he fought the beast that had been terrorizing this small town, and upon striking the final fatal blow, the dragon was instantly transformed and it turned into wood and laid down roots, becoming the old oak tree that stands there today, encapsulating the evil energy of this fearsome dragon.
See, because that was really interesting when I first found this piece of information. So I've seen it from a few sites. I saw it probably about a month ago, when we were looking at some research and ideas for some episodes. And I was like, I remember saying to you about a month ago, oh, we need to talk about this tree. In a fairy tale episode. But what's interesting is, like, this is a very, like, really cool tale about this dragon.
And a lot of people know about it on the island.
And a lot of people know about the dragon tree. Like, I said to my mum, oh, yeah, we're talking about this dragon tree in Bryston. And she said she knew about the dragon tree, which is really cool. But they haven't actually been there before. My parents. But when we arrived there to go and see the dragon tree, there's a scroll that hangs from the tree, which is amazing, by the way. There's like all these like really cool artifacts and sort of folklore.
There was
items.
quite a few interesting items around, and it's in a really serene area. It's really pretty. It's really quiet. Beautiful. You can hear the brook and like the stream as you're walking around it. One like complaint that I will have is that I stood in dog poop. So if you are gonna go there, pick up your damn dog poop.
Yeah, and don't step in it.
Yeah, and if you are going to go there, don't stand in it, because it just makes it worse.
Essentially, stick to the path. It wasn't dragon poo, it was dog poo.
Yeah, it was dog poo.
If it was dragon poo,
pick up your dog poo. It's bad for people and for the environment.
Yeah, just don't do it.
Yeah.
It's disgusting. Anyway, back to the dragon tree. We went there, we read through the scroll which told the story and the tale.
However, it wasn't the story that we have just told you and that we had originally found.
So this story that I found here was from online about people, like folklorists, that said about it.
Matched multiple articles.
It did.
And it basically kind of insists that the dragon was almost a demonic manifestation that was terrorizing all of these people.
And it had to be killed.
Yeah. It had to be slain, and that this demonic energy had attached itself into this tree. Yeah. And that's why the tree had kind of uprooted itself and turned on its side, and it didn't grow properly, and it's massive and kind of scary looking. Yeah. But when you went to this like tree in this such a serene area, this scroll very much said otherwise. Yeah,
because we got there and we said, I just don't believe that this was a bad place.
It didn't feel negative at all.
It didn't feel like something bad was going on. It didn't feel creepy.
No, it wasn't creepy.
It looks very creepy, but it looks also quite like I said, like very serpent-like. Yeah. Like dragons and reptilian, kind of that kind of vibe. But upon reading the scroll, I sort of stopped halfway and I said, this doesn't match up to the story, because it's like the total opposite. Which it describes the dragon to have actually been a protector of nature, and that it had grown old essentially, and that it curled up by the stream, and because of its devotion to nature and the wildlife in the area and its protection.
And it said that this dragon had special powers. It
could heal trees.
Invoked nature to basically live forever around it. Yeah, it could
make the trees like whisper, and it could make trees grow high and branches grow and flowers blossom and all this stuff.
It basically gave everlasting life to the forest, and greenery that's around it. Yeah. According to this scroll.
which is really lovely.
Yeah.
And then the dragon, when it got old, it curled up, and because of its devotion, it died. But upon dying, it turned into a giant oak tree.
Yeah, it curled itself up by the riverbed.
And it's, the tree very much is like scale-like, and there's no other oak trees around it like it.
Yeah.
There are oak trees around it, but they're not like it at all. But it curled itself up, and it allowed these big branches to stretch out across the stream and across like the sort of land, to sort of provide like an eternal protection of nature.
Yeah.
Which I think that's the kind of vibe I get there, because it's so beautiful, so quiet, so serene. That it's like, I think that is the true story.
Yeah.
And I think that it's probably been swung either way, and people like making things up.
Didn't it also mention in the scroll that it had purposely turned into a tree because trees like produce oxygen and stuff, so it was another way of it like giving life
so.
continually,
Breathing.
even in its death.
Yeah.
Which is a really, really beautiful story.
It really is.
And it was quite heartwarming to read, actually.
You kind of felt safe there, didn't you?
Yeah, like we were in the middle.
Sort of one with it.
I say in the middle of the woods. It's about like a 5-minute journey away from a main road, but you can't hear any cars when you're near it because it's Bryston and it's in the middle of nowhere. It's a very quiet area. But when you're in there, you do feel like you're in the middle of woods. You feel like you're in the middle of nowhere. And there's no animals in the field that are right next to it.
No.
So you are like quite isolated, really.
It's very isolated.
But it felt so quiet and so peaceful.
Yeah.
Just muy tranquila.
Yeah. So, yeah, beautiful story. So go and check out our post, because we thought there's one like very demonic-esque version of it, and there's also the one that we read, when you go there.
Yeah.
That it reads it to be very beautiful, naturistic, natural kind of adaptation.
Yeah, and we agree with the naturistic scroll that we found, because we felt that it was a sign that we had found it there.
It's very peaceful.
If you are going to come to the Isle of Wight, make sure that you do visit the Dragon Tree in Bryston.
Just pop on your maps to the Dragon Tree. It will take you right there.
Yeah, it's not exactly like a landmark or anything like that, but you can just type it into your maps and it will take you right there. It does
turn up. So
yeah,
go and check it out. Go and check out our post.
It's a very quiet little 5-minute woodland walk.
It is. It's very, very beautiful, and all that, aside from the shit all over the floor.
Yeah.
But talking about things that might be real or fake, or this or that, that moves us very nicely into our boo or bust.
First of all, go and let us know in the comments of this YouTube video or on the post of our Instagram if you think whether the dragon tree is demonic and has purposely grown on its side because it's evil and it's meant to be rooting against everything that's around it, or do you think that it's grown on its side because it's a lovely dragon that's fallen to sleep and is still trying to help the environment? Let us know what you think. And also let us know what you think for this story, which is from a Reddit user called Man Tony the First on the No Sleep subreddit, and it's called The Goblin in My Bedroom, and it goes like this. I'm sharing this because I think I'm finally ready to. This happened to me when I was little, about 5 or 6. I tried to tell my parents about it, but of course they didn't believe me. So eventually I gave up. But here, I know this is a place to share things like this. You people have an open mind, probably because most of you have had horrific encounters yourselves. This is the only place I can turn, because however much I emphasize that it was real, anyone else I tell will say that it was my childish imagination. Now here's what happened. I was playing in my room one day, around noontime, practicing my pog flipping technique, when I heard something. It sounded like movement, something scuttling around behind the skirting board. It freaked me out a bit, but Mum called me down for lunch, so I forgot about it for a while.
That night, after I was tucked in and the light was turned off, I suddenly remembered the noise. I listened to my mum's footsteps gradually fade into silence. The most fear-inspiring type of silence. I didn't often get scared at night unless I watched a scary film or heard a creepy story. My cousin liked to scare me with stories and once told me one about the neck, body and legs, but that is a different tale. Just like any other time that I'd been scared at night, I felt and heard every breath I drew and pulled my covers up until only my eyes poked out. It's funny how you can feel a little bit protected by the duvet, even though you know it would only serve no protection at all against a genuine threat.
Regardless of the duvet, it still felt like the darkness itself was about to reach out for me at any second, or that something was going to appear and swallow me whole. When you get scared like this, even as a child, some rational part of your brain knows that nothing is really going to happen, that you're not about to see a ghost float through the room or see a face randomly appear in the mirror. But this time, it happened. I really did hear something scutter across the floor. I saw a shadow move towards the end of my bed.
I screamed, and a few seconds later I heard my mum's footsteps approach. The door swung open and she flipped on the light and asked what had happened. When I told her that I'd seen something, she emitted a sigh of relief and told me it was just my imagination. I insisted that I'd seen something moving, but she checked everywhere, including under my bed, and there was nothing strange to be found. Even I started to wonder if it was just a dream, but deep down I knew that I'd seen something.
I had a few more nights like this, and eventually my mum told me that she wouldn't come in anymore unless she thought it was a real emergency. I once tried shouting, "Fire!" after that, which panicked my dad for a minute, but a mother can see through that ruse like it was a glass. Before I carry on talking about the nighttime visitor, I want to mention something that happened to me in the daytime once. I was playing in my room, which didn't happen often at this point as I knew something was going on at night, but now and then, in the light of day when things don't seem so scary, I didn't think of my room as a scary place, so I felt perfectly safe in there.
That was ruined for a long time by something that happened. I heard scuttling again, behind the skirting board. I was a little bit freaked out again, but felt braver this time. I found myself crouching down, reaching out towards the wall to inspect it. Then it happened. My hand disappeared. I looked at my outstretched arm, at the end of my wrist, there was just nothing. From the shock, I sort of stumbled backwards onto my backside, crying my eyes out. Without thinking, I naturally wiped tears from my eyes, and at this point I realised that my hand was there. It had come back. But still, I obviously was in a real state, as my hand had just vanished for a few seconds, without explanation. So I raced out of my room to find a parent's arms to cry into.
Then, one night, the shadow visited once again, and I figure that whatever it was had learned that my mother wasn't coming to protect me anymore. I saw it scuttle across my floor yet again. I didn't even try shouting, thinking it was a waste of breath. But then something new happened. I saw something appear at the end of my bed. All I could see was a shadow as it was dark, but as my eyes adjusted, I made out a vague shape of a small head, long pointy ears, and a large hooked nose.
Now I was screaming for my life. Somehow the eyes seemed to light up, horrible sickly yellow with a black slit down the middle.
I threw my duvet off and leapt out of bed, intending to head for the door, but I felt a cold, sharp-clawed hand grasp my ankle. I looked back and saw a grinning face, with a mouth almost impossibly wide for the size of its head. A smile made up of teeth so sharp they looked like they could tear through flesh like it was butter. I clawed at the carpet, but the little creature was far stronger than it looked, and it dragged me away into the darkness of my bedroom. Even in my terror, I still managed to wonder where it was taking me. I looked around and realised that my eyes had adjusted even more to the dark, but what I saw shocked me to the core. The goblin was dragging me into the wall. The goblin, along with the lower half of my body, had already disappeared completely into the wall somehow.
Despite my struggling against it, and remember I was only a small child, not much bigger than the little beast itself, I felt myself slowly being pulled into the wall. I could feel a cold, wet surface on my back, as it was my head that went through the wall. I felt it hit rock. I looked around and I was no longer in my bedroom. I was in some sort of cave, lit only by a couple of wall-mounted torches, burning a reddish flame. The goblin dragged me further in and released me, but by this point I was surrounded by several of the creatures, all snarling and cackling a demonish cackle that suggested an intent as evil as you could possibly imagine.
Then something happened that I wasn't expecting. I heard a man's echoey voice yelling from somewhere along the tunnel. Some sort of battle cry now that I think of it. I, with the goblins, looked over to see a quite literal knight in shining, well, actual quite dull and rusty armour, running in my direction with his sword raised.
You might be thinking that this knight was about to become my saviour, but that would make the story some kind of fantasy epic. This is no fantasy epic. It's a real-life account of horrific events that I had to endure and come to terms with over the years, and this is the most horrifying part yet. The knight came in like a valiant hero, sword swinging all over the place, knocking back goblins and slicing up others. But all it took was for one of them to get past the arching swing of his blade to cling to his face. The helmet was thrown off, and the poor man's face was ripped open in seconds. Without his sight, dozens of other goblins swarmed around him to join the feast, tearing off his armour and then his skin.
I couldn't watch anymore, but I couldn't block out the screams. The blood-curdling screams were not just of unbearable pain, but of terror, the kind of desperate screams you hear from a man who knows that he is about to die in a horrific way. I couldn't help but glance back, just for a split second, but that was all that was needed to see the absolute sickening horror on that man's face.
The screams finally stopped. The poor man must have bled out. The goblins took about another half an hour to strip every bit of flesh off his bones. They were between me and the part of the cave where some kind of portal to my bedroom must have been, so I could do nothing but sit there and wonder how long it would be before I was torn apart in such a brutal way. The goblins were about to turn their attention back to me, but I screamed, louder and more desperately than I'd ever screamed before. I didn't think anyone would hear me, but someone must have done, because then came another commotion from along the tunnel. Battle cries again, but hundreds of voices this time, and the gradually increasing thunder of marching boots.
Yes, I know, that was when an army of medieval-type soldiers turned up and decimated every last goblin. It does start to sound like some kind of fantasy epic again, but that's what happened. While the battle raged on, I managed to slip away. I found my way back through the cave wall and into the familiar surroundings of my bedroom.
Utterly terrorised by what I'd seen, I burst into my parents' room and threw myself at them, crying my little eyes out. They must have thought it was just a nightmare, but they saw how upset I was and just hugged me. I've had many years to think about this ordeal. As I grew up and learned about concepts that I didn't grasp back then, I started to develop theories. My most satisfying one so far is that some kind of cosmic event happened that would cause a fracture in time and space, and it happened to line up with physical space in my bedroom. This made travel between our universe and other parallel worlds possible.
Thankfully, though, I never saw any goblins again. That army must have defeated them all and perhaps the cave was sealed off. But I believe that there are even more worlds out there, especially after an encounter a few years later with another type of creature, which I'm convinced was some kind of chaotic universe very unlike ours, or the medieval type world that I'd visited. However, that's another story.
So there we go. That is the goblin in my bedroom story, which is really strange, very fantastical.
It is very fantastical.
I was saying to Jodie about this in the car yesterday, about the story, and I was saying that I would personally put it down to a very bad sleep paralysis thing.
It does sound a lot like sleep paralysis, to be fair.
Because it is so wild in terms of its like how elaborate it is.
Yeah.
And that's why I thought it'd be a really good idea to put it in the Boo Bus, because you like sleep paralysis is its own thing in general, in which we will speak about in a future episode. But I feel that this kind of story sort of blends that kind of what is true, what isn't, and this person sounds like very convinced that what they saw they did actually see.
Yeah.
But as do all people that have, like, say, sleep paralysis. Obviously they're very young. But again, I think that it boils down to a sort of sleep paralysis state. But obviously there are theories of cracks in time or other dimensions happening.
Yeah.
That I've heard lots of people say about, and obviously a lot of people can say, oh, that's not true. But that's like a weird phenomenon in itself.
It reminds me a lot of the Spiderwick Chronicles.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the only thing that I can really kind of compare this to.
Because different dimensions, different universes.
Yeah.
That like
It's like a fractured timeline.
accidentally
type
like get
thing.
fractured and sort of cracked into our
Yeah, it's like the multiverse.
timeline. You start.
Or you know what it is like? It's like the crack in the wall from Doctor Who.
That's what was going through my head.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the old Matt Smith episodes, they were cracking the wall.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
It is
So-
very much like that.
In regards to it being a boo or a bust, I think in the perspective of it being a sleep paralysis, I think it's definitely a boo.
I would agree. I think that's a very viable option
Mm.
because the only other things that I think people would be looking at is maybe like, who knows if this person later went on to be diagnosed with some type of mental disorder that allows them to have like hallucinations.
Yeah, that's very much true. It could be,
or maybe
a
they were
mental
on like
disorder.
some type of medicine at the time, because
Could be.
kids can have hallucinations if they're on the right type of medicine.
Oh yes,
You never know.
or the wrong type.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe if they're even like schizophrenic.
Mm.
You don't know these things until later on in
Yeah.
life a lot of the time.
There's a lot of context missing in
Yeah.
terms of behind perhaps what might cause it.
Yeah, exactly.
But in terms of this person actually happening,
Yeah.
I'd say it's more of a bust end.
Yeah.
Because I feel that it's so elaborate and so fantastical that I feel that it's something that the child would definitely see
Yeah.
during a sleep
It
paralysis
does
episode.
it feels more like a dream. I'd say that if they had gone back into their room and they had like a handprint or like a scratch or something on them to
It'd be more viable.
to represent that they did actually go somewhere, or if they'd gone back into their room and they had dirt all over them from where they'd been in the cave,
Yeah,
something along those lines.
it'd be more viable, wouldn't it?
Yeah, if there was a tiny bit of kind of evidence that they had thrown in there that would even make them believe it more, then I would definitely put it on the boo side of the scale. But just because it leaves them quite a questionable end, I'm going to give it a bust this time.
Yeah. I'd say it's a bust overall
Yeah.
in terms of it actually happening, but sleep paralysis wise, I'd say it's probably a boo.
I want to know what their other story is.
Yeah, because it says more to come. So
Yeah.
link in the description for the goblin in my bedroom
And
story.
if you want us to know what the other story is, or if you want to hear us read you the next story that this person's got, then let us know and we can do that for you.
Absolutely. So let us know what you think, whether it's a boo or a bust. And
Speaking of stories,
speaking of very fantastical stories and spooky trees as
Mm-hmm.
well, that leads us on to our Silver Scream.
to start off this episode's Silver Scream, we are going, as we usually do, going to give you a little movie quote so that you can get a little guess in for what the film is going to be for this episode. So, the quote reads as follows.
Evil seldom takes place immediately. It is often little more than a whisper at first, a glance, a betrayal. But then it grows and roots, still invisible, unnoticed. Only fairy tales give evil a proper shape. Let us know if you get the film from that quote. It's actually from the narration of the film, which is Guillermo del Toro's 2006 dark fantasy film, Pan's Labyrinth. So Pan's Labyrinth is a seminal 2006 Mexican-Spanish independent fantasy film directed by Guillermo del Toro, who also wrote the film. And it is widely regarded as one of the most influential fantasy horror films ever made, and is a foundational work of the sort of magic realism genre, which I fully agree with. It's great, and it's very much transports you into a different realm, and it blends very, very dark historic events, like fascist sort of Spanish moments, which we'll go on to in a bit, and also blending that with quite horrific fantasy sort of horror elements, which is really unique. And still, I don't think there's been much of that blend even to this day.
No, there really hasn't. I feel like the only director who really explores that niche genre of like fantastical horror is Del Toro. And obviously there's a few kind of people who do touch on it, but they focus more on like the real side of it, with things like A Nightmare on Elm Street, because it's still got that like fantastical element of dreams and all that stuff. But it's more of a like a real life.
This like blends like full on fantasy, like folklore.
Yeah, this is full on fairy tale creatures,
but in a dark way.
Yeah.
It's
like Narnia in dark mode.
Dark mode Narnia.
Yeah.
aka Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah.
So, a lot of you probably won't know the plot of Pan's Labyrinth. A lot of you might. I suppose if you're horror fans, you'll know what Pan's Labyrinth is all about. But in case you don't, here's a little plot summary for you all.
So the film's story is centered in a rural military outpost in 1944 Spain. In the brutal landscape of the post-Civil War, there is a captain called Vidal who brutally murders 2 captured rebels with a rifle. He is then subsequently revealed to be the embodiment of pure evil, as he is an unstoppable, inhuman force of fascism. Then there is the arrival of 10-year-old Ophelia, who arrives at the outpost with her mother. Ophelia then seeks an escape from the bleak reality of her life by finding a dilapidated labyrinth. She is pursued by her guide, who is a faun, played by Doug Jones, who recognises Ophelia as the reincarnation of Princess Moana, a royal figure from the underground realm of which the labyrinth has at its heart. Ophelia begins to undertake 3 dangerous tasks given to her by the faun to prove her lineage, while secretly aided by the housekeeper, Mercedes, who is played by Maribel Verdú, who is actually a spy for the rebels during the post-Civil War time. So the night culminates in Vidal murdering the kindly Dr. Ferrero before an extended confrontation with Mercedes and Ophelia. Ophelia refuses the ultimate command to shed the innocent blood of her younger newborn brother, showcasing her moral fortitude. Eventually, Vidal shoots Ophelia in the labyrinth. However, her act of sacrifice opens up the portal and her soul vanishes to the underground realm, leaving the certainty that her true world lives on.
So there we go. So that's sort of the general overarching sort of plot summary of Pan's Labyrinth. It sounds a bit confusing, and it sounds a bit like, what the hell's going on? But
it is a little bit confusing to watch, but when you're actually
when you've seen it,
paying attention in the film, it makes a whole lot more sense.
It is quite a simple story, but it's put in such a believable world.
Yeah,
I think, which is what makes it so magical and also
it's
so
just
scary.
The world has got so much lore to it.
Yeah.
Which is especially notable with Del Toro's films, because I hadn't actually seen this film before we watched it for the episode. And something that I've noticed about Del Toro's directing work anyway, obviously he writes them as well.
Yeah.
But it's that the storyline for these and the historical aspects of it, as well as the character development and just all of like the storytelling aspects of it, are very much developed pieces of work. Whereas the cinematography is kept quite simple.
Yeah.
The world building in his work is his like selling point, I think.
It is.
It's absolutely terrific how he manages to make all these things manifest.
He's known for his practical effects. He likes to make things be real by you actually seeing real things. So its influence and legacy aspects. So Pan's Labyrinth popularized and codified many of the tropes that would very much define mature fantasy cinema, including the blend of real-world history, like we were saying just now, and mythical monsters. So the use of like a simple wartime setting, the moral girl trope, which is essentially a protagonist who sacrifices herself for a greater good, as well as like the emphasis on like the moral choice over simple obedience. So it's very much a masterclass in its imagery in terms of what it presents. So like we were saying earlier, his direction relies on atmospheric cinematography. So it's very simple, but it's very atmospheric through what is seen in the mise-en-scène.
The cinematography relies on the surroundings, I'd say.
It does.
It's not very fancy camera angles or lighting or
but it does it in
elaborate.
Just a very sweet, clever way.
Yeah.
I think.
And it's very much... Simple. I think it's very much that so much is going on within the scenes, like storytelling-wise and kind of through props and set and mise-en-scène, like you were talking about.
Yeah.
That it really kind of is nice that the cinematography is so stripped back, because it's got such an elaborate effect on the creatures and the world and the surroundings, like we were talking about.
Yeah.
And the actual like creativity of the background that carries the entire film, I think.
Yeah, 100%. You're very right in that. Which obviously creates like a very relentless emotional tension. So alongside this, it was made on a low budget. The film became one of the most successful international fantasy films of its time, which paved the way for similar non-English high-concept feature films as well to follow. And you've probably seen the Pale Man as a villain. He's one that holds his hands up to where his eyes are, and he's got little eyeballs
in the
both
palms of his hands.
Palms of his hands, which a lot of people have seen but don't know it's from Pan's Labyrinth. Which is, you know, the Pale Man is a blind, flesh-eating monster who stores his eyes in his hands, and he became one of the most recognisable and enduring fantasy villains in movie history, which is, you know, very true. He's very iconic and very creepy, I find.
He's very creepy.
You know, the pig squeals that make up the screams, and sort of the things that he represents, and the imagery within where his table is and the grand feast. There's so many representations and in there of like religious like context of it being quite church-like, and sort of that idea of greed as well, with Ophelia taking like the grapes and stuff. And there's a lot of religious connotations in there.
And there's also a lot of like fable-like connotations with all the like the kids' shoes and
there is
all of those different types of things where it's about like him having done this before, and
there's a lot of
it gives like a slight Hansel and Gretel vibe as well.
It does. And there's also, unfortunately, there's a lot of well, not unfortunately for the film, but I mean in terms of contextually, it's unfortunate that the way I perceived it as well, with all the shoes piled up, was very much a reference to what the Nazis did in the war, because obviously it was set during that time, you know, with the Jewish people. So the pile of shoes and stuff, I think, was a little nod to like the very horrors of the war, and that was still very much being endured during the time that Pan's Labyrinth was set. So,
and I think it also brings attention to areas that may have not been so widely focused on within history. Obviously, because there were a lot higher numbers that were being attacked in different areas of the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I think that areas like Spain, for example, who were having their own civil, like independent wars at the time, aren't really noted in other regions.
No.
So it's quite like, I think, important for countries like Spain and like surrounding areas to have recognition for their own historic events in films like this.
Yeah, 100%. And in a very cinematic signature, the themes of disobedience and as a virtue and fascism as the truest monster are very much highlighted across the film, with a reference to the director's lifelong fascination with fairy tales and history. So going on to some little facts, I suppose, about the film. One of which is
about the Pale Man and the Faun, who are two of the main characters in the film, basically.
Two of the main sort of fantastical creatures.
And it was a single actor that played both of them. So there is obviously the Pale Man that we just spoke about, who is the saggy, pale, skin-crawling creature.
Very much looks like a skinwalker.
Yeah.
That type of thing, or a rake in terms of modern ways, but like saggy skin, very bony legs.
Yeah.
It's quite grim.
It is very, very grim. Who holds his hands in front of his face. With his eyes in his palms. As well as the mysterious Faun, who I thought was actually quite scary as well.
Yeah.
I think
the
like
Faun's always got like
scary.
he's got a little like dark side to him, because he's obviously wants Ophelia to do bad things. Or like very dangerous things, but he kind of quite enjoys the idea of it. But obviously he's the servant. You know, in the end, which you find out he's not actually bad. And
with his legs and his hands being made of like wood as well, he's got a very like
one with nature vibe.
One with nature, but also very like creepy, like croaky type of aura to
Yeah,
him.
it's really interesting.
It is very interesting.
Take on the faun.
And they were both played by the same actor, Doug Jones, who is actually a frequent collaborator with Guillermo del Toro, and he's known for his masterful, expressive creature movements. So it just seems that he's really good at being non-human, essentially.
Absolutely.
Which is...
It's very well portrayed in the film.
Yeah, very peculiar, but you've got to like tip your hat to him because he does really embody these characters.
He does.
In like...
Very believable.
Yeah, in a fantastical and like almost extraterrestrial way. Like these aren't earthly beings in how they're acting.
Yeah.
And there was actually a huge language barrier between Guillermo del Toro and Jones, as he's American and he didn't speak a word of Spanish. So for his lines, which the film is entirely set in Spanish, so if you're going to watch it, you can either watch it the dubbed English version, which is the lazy way, or you can watch it fully in Spanish with the English subtitles on. My advice is always watch films in the language that they are performed in and read the subtitles, because then you get their actors. Obviously, if you're visually impaired, then it's perfectly fine to listen to the dubbed version.
Yeah.
But apart from that, if you have perfect vision or near enough perfect vision, watch it in Spanish and listen to it in Spanish as well, and just turn the subtitles on.
Please do.
Because it's such a better experience to get it in the true language that it was portrayed in.
Mm-hmm.
However, this meant that he had to phonetically learn his lines for the faun character, as the faun has quite a lot of speech in the film. And he then performed them on set, but his voice was later dubbed in post-production by a Spanish actor called Pablo Adan, but it meant that his on-set performance basically had the same mannerisms as how the lines should have been delivered by the physical presence, meaning that the timings lined up perfectly for them.
That's such a clever way of doing it.
Yeah.
And like I say, phonetically sort of saying things, like learn them in a phonetical sense.
Mm-hmm.
But having them line up perfectly and having his amazing sort of physical performance made sure that it was believable even when they dubbed it with a voice actor on top of it. You just wouldn't know. I did not know that at all.
I had no idea.
And like we were saying earlier about the Pale Man, obviously played by Doug Jones as well, that his design, particularly like the gruesome detail of the monster sitting upon the banquet table, is directly inspired by the famous Francisco Goya painting, which is Saturn devouring his son, which, the scene in the film symbolizes the greed of power. So like Captain Vidal's fascism that consumes innocence. So like I said, there's a lot of, war-esque representation. There's also a lot of religious connotations and a lot of all sorts that whole scene represents, and it's very, very fascinating, but also scary, because subconsciously you take all these things in without even understanding it. There's the imagery really makes that much more scary.
Such important things like the consumption of innocence in the real world happening with the fascist army trying to take over, and this story being from a child's perspective, as she feels that she's kind of having to gain independence because her mother's sick and she doesn't have a father, and all these different types of things that she's navigating herself are really portrayed in the like side stories but important details of characters like the Pale Man, where he is literally eating innocence because he eats kids. Yeah. So it's such a interesting way of portraying the same story but on its head in a different realm. But it really gets you thinking, like, what's happening here? What does that represent? Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to unpack, and obviously Del Toro is very much so detailed with his work. So there's obviously going to be so much history, so much lore behind everything he's writing. Yeah, and it just tells such important aspects of society in digestible, almost child-friendly ways. It does, very much so. Yeah, it's really, really interesting and so important, I think. And talking about Del Toro's like vision, he actually originally wanted the film's title to be El Labyrinto del Fauno, which translates to the Labyrinth of the Faun, which is I knew before doing the research, which in all was done for like all regions to emphasize that the story belonged to the creature, like the faun, not the pan god of Greek mythology. So it was very much a way of wanting it to be titled after the creature that owns the labyrinth, and it was there for Ophelia.
So Del Toro considers Pan's Labyrinth to be a sister film to his early Spanish Civil War ghost story, which is called The Devil's Backbone, which came out in 2001, where both films use a haunting period setting and a child protagonist encountering supernatural elements to explore themes of war, loss, and innocence. So again, as you know, he likes, there's that idea, and I think even I've read somewhere that his more recent film, The Shape of Water, was also in like a sequel to Pan's Labyrinth in a roundabout way, connected somehow.
It is really cool when directors have such niche areas that they manage to intertwine with everything.
Especially their own work, when it's like not directly, Pan's Labyrinth 2 or The Dawn of the Fawn.
Yeah.
That's quite a cool name.
Almost in the new It season, where they've announced that the new soldier character that they're introducing is actually the original like chef from The Shining, who has the Shining power. And it's the same guy, just at a different period in his life, but they all interconnect.
It's really cool how they interconnect when it's
really,
not
really cool.
necessarily the same, but it's really cool.
And another thing that's really cool is not only are they all interconnecting, but like how we were saying, it portrays that original type of story that was already sat there with the folklore and things like that being turned into fairy tales, like we did at the very start of the episode. But there's a particular part in this story, which is the Mandrake root, where Del Toro actually based the lore of the Mandrake root in the film, where Ophelia places it under her mother's bed. It's actually based on real medieval superstitions that believed that Mandrake root had medicinal and magical properties that could heal people.
It's interesting because obviously in the film, the mother throws the Mandrake root into the fire of the bedroom, which inherently basically kills her or starts the pregnancy, and she dies during childbirth. Which, you know, that's a really cool detail about the old Mandrake root and about the links to its like magical lore and its medieval superstitions associated with it.
And something that has kind of just clicked for me now as well is with the Mandrake root crying as it goes into the fire. It's the exact same as how it's represented in Harry Potter as well.
It is. Yeah, there's
with
a Mandrake.
the Mandrakes screaming and crying every time that they're pulled up, aren't they?
Yep.
Which is interesting that it's then portrayed, because that was kind of at a similar time of this, wasn't it?
Because I think that was in the Chamber of Secrets, which is in 2002.
Yeah.
Which was 4 years before.
Exactly.
Yes.
So they're all quite like.
So there's a lot of Mandrake stuff going on.
So it must have been like a global folklore that was believed, or superstition from these like earlier cultures, which is really, really cool.
Obviously a very prevalent sort of fantastical thing, you know, within sort of fantasy culture, which is why both these sort of fantasy epics like Harry Potter and Pan's Labyrinth represented the Mandrake root. But regarding production and recognition, there's a very much a costume challenge. So Doug Jones's fawn costume was so heavy and detailed that he had to be actually carried to the set in pieces and could not sit down during breaks. So the fawn's legs were entirely CGI below the knee to achieve the reverse jointed look of like the fawn, which I thought it was just done with like green screen, like green legged type thing. They just removed it. So even like back in 2006, that's some really great CGI.
It is really great CGI for back then.
And obviously he plays it so well as if he is standing like that, you know.
Yeah, it looks so natural.
The film, like we said, was a massive success as well. Then it earned 6 Academy Award nominations and won 3 of those, which was Best Cinematography, Best Art Direction, and Best Makeup, which, you know, agree with those, especially the art direction and makeup.
Yeah,
I mean,
the art direction.
I think that's probably unbeatable, really.
Yeah.
It very much holds out today, nearly being 20 years old. And he actually insisted the film to be made in Spanish to maintain its authenticity, famously turning down offers from Hollywood studios that would have required him to film it entirely in English, which, you know, if you think a film set in Spain during a post-Civil War era in 1944, wouldn't make sense if they were all speaking English, would it?
No, it really wouldn't at all.
regarding film techniques that were present in Pan's Labyrinth, there were many different aspects, and like we said, it's very much the film techniques and the world that bring the film and and its fantastical elements to life, essentially.
And the almost main one is that the color coding of the worlds is so meticulous, and Del Toro actually did that on purpose because he used different colors to distinguish the two different parallel realities that we see in the film. So the real world, or the fascist Spain that we get to see, is usually portrayed with cold, muted blues, greys, and military greens, which are typically quite dark. This obviously represents the brutality and rigid order and lifelessness of the world that Captain Vidal is creating, versus the fantasy world or the underground realm that they're trying to get Ophelia to be a part of again, which is full of warm and vibrant colours like golds and reds and ambers, and it really just embodies a magical, imaginative, emotional truth that Ophelia is trying to seek because she's not getting that in her real world.
Yeah, for sure.
And even with Ophelia's own clothing, she's always got a splash of colour, almost to signify that she's different from the others.
That she's
and
royal in that.
Yeah, and I even noticed this in the film actually, is that she wears green quite a lot, which green is obviously a positive colour. So to be in such a bleak environment and be wearing green all the time.
Yeah, I mean everyone else is sort of wearing browns.
Yeah.
Around, and her mum wearing white often, so that sense of purity. Yeah. As well.
Exactly.
But she was wearing a lot of green as well, which in that naturistic vibe. But also she stands out in terms of style amongst everyone.
Yeah, and apparently that was done on purpose to show that she serves as a bridge between the two realms.
Yeah, so her red sash and her green dress is sort of that blend of the green military thing.
Yeah.
But the red of the royalty of the underground world that she is actually part of and belongs to.
And also typically green is the colour that sits between blue and red and amber, which on a genuine colour scale is just how it works. So it really makes sense between
she is that
the blend of those two worlds.
Yeah. So in regards to camera movement and perspectives as well, there's very much a voyeuristic movements. Del Toro often employs very slow voyeuristic camera movements, so similar to the long takes which we spoke about in the Halloween episode last week, which if you haven't checked out, please go and do so.
Yeah.
Like we said, when Michael Myers is stalking, there's real long takes that were going on. But in Pan's Labyrinth, the camera frequently acts as a very watchful, often sympathetic presence. So it silently observes the suffering in the real world or glides through the magical ones. So it very much represents what world we are watching right now.
And it does give that supernatural vision exactly the same way that it did for Halloween when we were talking about it, when you said that you got that supernatural glide that happens.
Yeah.
You very much have that in this, but it gives more of a supernatural way of a fantastical and magical realm rather than a more sinister or spiritual embodiment.
Very much so. And it used Dutch angles, which if you don't know film theory or film techniques, is essentially when the camera, if you're looking at a very horizontal line in front of you, imagine the camera's tilted in terms of degrees, in any way, and it sort of tilts the frame slightly. That is a Dutch angle which he uses it in very subtle ways in scenes involving Captain Vidal to sort of convey that sense of unease or moral imbalance and psychological instability associated with his character and his actions as well. And often you'll have the Dutch angle that often twists and turns with Ophelia in the ending scene when there's that sort of when it changes realms, the camera sort of changes with it, so it's very, very meticulously done.
I feel it's a very, I don't know if this is the right way, but a very following film. You're not only following a story, but you are actually following the characters
in a very, very close way. I think, and you see things you kind of feel like you're holding secrets against Captain Vidal, and also about things, about Ophelia that she's got to do. And so you're kind of like on this very contrasting conflict the whole way through.
It is a very literal follow through of a story.
It is. And the real world scenes feature very harsh practical sounds in regards to sound design. So the clack of Vidal's boot heels and the rattling of the machinery and the crackle of gunfire are sort of really, it's very harsh because there's not really much music across the film as well.
Well, it just really contrasts like the fantasy scenes where it shows the other like mystical realm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where it's like a more muted, just atmospheric sounds, very like natural sounding of like winds and leaves, and also the groan of like the Labyrinth has its own groan because it's meant to represent its own kind of.
Like, it's its own character.
Yeah, it's its own character. It's its own.
It's living.
Thing.
Yeah.
And also the twinkling of the fairies' wings as they're leading her to different places.
And we were saying when we were watching it that we feel that the fairies sort of sound was probably sort of grasped and sampled from birds.
Yeah.
Because they sound like birds tweeting, which is very like naturistic. So again, you sort of feel comforted with them because we're all very used to hearing birds tweeting around you in nature, and it's sort of you feel very much a part of it.
Yeah.
When you hear the fairies, so they're very innocent.
100%.
As well.
And one of the key kind of things that Del Toro is known for is that he prioritizes his practical effects, so costumes and makeup, over the digital like run-ins that can be like used a lot nowadays.
It's probably very much in the way of like, unless it's impossible to capture practically.
Yeah, like the bottom half of the fawn's legs because they're reversed inwards, like.
Or the fairies.
Yeah.
Which is really, really interesting. So like we said, the fawn and the pale man being completely practical aside from the legs of the fawn. Because Del Toro believes that the physical creatures interacting with the lighting on the set and with the characters as well.
With the other characters. It gives you something to properly interact with instead of trying to imagine what somebody could look like.
Absolutely. They sort of yield a more convincing and ultimately terrifying result, especially in regards to the Pale Man, than like purely digital creations do alone. And I know I saw recently about Del Toro's upcoming Frankenstein film.
Yeah.
That he really wanted to go like full blown on the old practical, that even like the giant ship that the monster pushes and he throws people off of is all entirely practical, and uses machinery to tilt the ship and stuff, and it is just giant. And he said that when he believes that having that practical sense gives it that reality that what we're seeing actually is real.
It's real, yeah.
Not like made up, because it makes your brain like kind of subconsciously realize what's real and what's not.
Yeah.
So it's brilliant film work and directing.
It is really brilliant, and it's just, it goes to show how much effort is important over kind of visuals. Like, not everything has to be done through CGI, and makeup and costume are so imperative to good filmmaking, especially fantastical filmmaking. Yeah,
where it's a world that's entirely different.
Yeah, like if you want to bring this film to life, bringing it to real life in the realest way you can is by making these things.
Yeah.
Even if you don't think that you can, just doing it as closely as possible. It's such a more grasping thing to watch when it works that way. And even for the Pale Man, the really iconic scene where he places his eyeballs like off of the plate in front of him and into the palms of his hands was actually used. It was like achieved by using really detailed prosthetics and like clever camera angles to like not show everything fully.
Yeah.
But again, it just really enhances that disturbing, like scary scene of like, oh shit, this creature is coming after me, and it has eyeballs in its hands.
Yeah.
Like, I'd never seen anything like that until
it's such a clever creature design.
Yeah, it really is.
It really is clever.
There's nothing like it, I don't think.
No. But talking about very important elements of the film, we said about the very simplistic music, which very much brings us onto Shivering Soundtracks.
As as for Shivering Soundtracks, with most horror films especially, the music for Pan's Labyrinth is a crucial element of the film, despite there not being actually like a lot of it in there.
But it's very, very important when it's there.
Yeah, it was masterfully composed by Javier Navarrete, and it was actually his first Academy Award nomination.
I mean, that's really cool in itself. I mean, what a film to have your first nomination for.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and when the music is there, it's very, very powerful. And often when it comes, because it's absent a lot in the film, and not loads, but when it's absent and when it does appear,
it invokes so
that
much
really
more
adds
of
that
an
more emotion, because it's a really important scene, you know. So obviously, like we said, the soundtrack was composed by Javier Navarrete, who is a Spanish composer and collaborates very frequently with Del Toro on his Spanish language films such as The Devil's Backbone, which obviously, which you said about earlier, came before.
Mm-hmm.
The entire score is built very much around a single central piece of music, which is a very haunting wordless lullaby, which appears at the very, very, very start of the film and at the end as well, where the simple melody acts as a very musical axis for the film, with its like permutations to represent different characters and emotional states. So you'll hear the same tune, it's like and it changes more.
Yeah.
But that theme comes back in different instrumentation styles and different instruments that represent it.
It does.
To represent the different characters, which is really cool.
And I did notice that while we were watching it, that the lullaby is sung in the beginning of the film, and then it obviously ends with that, and unfortunately Ophelia's death kind of with that as well.
Yeah, you know where it comes from.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is Mercedes.
But it also, in that case, follows a very like cyclical narrative as well as a cyclical soundtrack, in that it starts with the lullaby, ends with the lullaby. It starts with her being in the underground realm, essentially, and then coming out of that and then returning to it. So it's like she's returning to her home only to probably escape one day and then have the same story happen again. So it's like her going back to her birthplace or escaping her birthplace. It's like a whole circle of
it's so well like constructed. And the music was performed by the City of Prague Philharmonic Orchestra, which contributes as it scores like very, very rich yet sort of spare sort of orchestral sound, because there is orchestra in it, and when it does come in, it's very, very rich in its sound. It's very, very great. It's a beautiful soundtrack.
It really is a beautiful soundtrack, and one of the key motifs that we've just already spoken about is the lullaby, which is the main theme not only for the film but for the key moments of the film as it surrounds Ophelia, the main character. But it's featured a breathy female voice humming the tune, which is usually meant to invoke a childhood innocence as well as the magical realm, because it's got quite what people would describe as an airy fairy vibe to it.
It's very fantastical in its sort of, you know, melody, and you know, also it's in its humming. And I think that it's really important with fantastical stories as well, because even with things like Beauty and the Beast or Sleeping Beauty, especially in live action remakes, these characters always hum things or sing things. They do.
It's very important to have a slight...
It's very comforting.
Musical... Yeah, it's a very comforting thing that I think is so... It's important for like audiences to grasp onto.
Yeah, 100%. Know? And the humming obviously appears as the opening long time ago track, and is echoed in sort of the very beautiful final track, which is the Pan's Labyrinth lullaby. So it's comes as orchestral versions and as just a singular female voice version across the film, in which, like we said earlier, about its sort of contrasting moods. So like Navarrete skillfully used sort of the orchestra to contrast the film's two worlds. So like the fantasy aspect featured music with very wondrous, wary melancholy, using very lush strings and, you know, they're very like ethereal sort of lullabies, whereas the reality aspect in the reality world, the music very quickly becomes very dark and very ominous, reflecting the war and Captain Vidal's brutality, which utilizes very sort of heavy brass and disturbing choral chants, particularly in the tracks in the soundtrack like not human, which is really cool.
Yeah. What is the age rating for this film? Do you know?
15.
It's a 15.
Yeah.
I would say so, because it's actually quite dark. Considering you would watch it and you would think, oh, okay, this is most likely going to be a kid's film. It's very dark and quite graphic for a kid's film.
And the poster doesn't really give away that it's very graphic, does it? It looks like a kid's movie, really.
Yeah,
but
it really does.
it is very, very grim. It's very, very grim.
Yeah, and it's so imperative, obviously, the contrast in this film between the underground realm as well as the overground realm and the war that is like happening and is effectively tearing her apart and leading her to this wanting to escape her life that she currently has. But it's not only that it's being represented in the story itself, but this is what's so important with filmmaking, is if you choose to have a theme in your work, you need to incorporate it in as many of the elements as possible.
Yeah,
like
it needs to belong.
Yeah, there's contrast in the story, there's contrast in the costume, there's contrast in the color, and there's even contrast in the soundtrack.
Absolutely.
To really separate these two worlds and to make it known that there is an important difference between the two that you need to pick up on, whether it's visually or audibly. But yeah, I just thought that was really interesting and really important.
It's really done masterfully in this film. So, regards to going a bit deeper into the music, so Captain Vidal, who obviously, like we said, represents the sort of rigid, destructive force of fascism, is the only main character who is not associated with the lullaby theme or any rich emotional music. So his scenes are very much instead scored with very harsh percussive sounds and sharp brass, or very deliberate musical silence, which emphasizes lack of imagination, empathy, and connection to anything transcendent.
Yeah, but what is associated with him is an incessant, repetitive ticking.
Yeah, the clock.
Yeah.
Very much so.
His pocket watch, which he has on him all the time.
Yeah.
And it just drives you insane while you're watching the film, or at least it did for me.
It drives Captain Vidal insane. And obviously, you have the lullaby and the mythology behind it, which isn't just the general theme of like innocence and childlike sort of nature, but it also functions as a mythological device and represents the memory of Princess Moana, so like Ophelia, her royal blood, and serves as a kind of magical identifier for Ophelia, which proves her connection to the underground realm despite her amnesia in the human world. Because when she leaves the fantastical world,
she doesn't remember anything.
She doesn't remember anything, and ends up dying, and then her soul gets put into another body and hopefully finds her way back to the kingdom. But yeah.
That also goes for the more darker and like menacing themes that are in the film as well. So for the journey of the Pale Man, Navarrete also utilised a mixed choir to create an unsettling and ancient and kind of macabre tone to the piece that's associated with this character in the film. There's also the use of human voices, which are chanting in a wordless and abstract manner, which inevitably just heightens the sense of otherworldly terror that this character is about to unleash. But it really contrasts the simple and pure voice that the lullaby carries throughout the film.
So there's all that contrast between the two worlds
and
other worlds within the fantastical realms. They really make the film incredibly believable.
Yeah, and I think also just thinking about it now, how the film is kind of put out like timeline wise, where you've got this contrasting of the harsh fascist like non-melodic sounds versus the really soft, sweet, caring lullaby, and it's kind of bouncing between the two the entire film. You've then got the Pale Man's macabre and unsettling choir almost smack bang in the middle of the timeline of the film. So it's almost like a huge spiking point that creates a mountain either side of like tension. Which
it's really important. It's very, very effective in terms of, again, that contrast between the realms and the different sub-realms within the world of the film.
Yeah.
So like we said, very much there is a reliance on the piano to carry the melody. So the instrument's very clear and notoriously resonant, and solitary sound mirrors Ophelia's loneliness and the clarity of her moral vision, which is often emerging from like the very deeper orchestral textures that come like before it.
Well, the music for this was actually recorded in Prague, like we mentioned, by the City of Prague Philharmonic Orchestra, and it was done using a full high-quality European orchestra, which basically allowed the composer Navarrete to achieve a really rich traditional sound of like a classical fantasy score that we've obviously been seeing for generations now in fairy tale like films. Even in the classic old Disney ones, like Snow White or Sleeping Beauty.
All orchestra.
And it just really is that lending scope to the smaller independent Spanish films because it gives it that weight.
Yeah, it does, because it's an independent film.
Yeah.
That real quality, beautiful, rich, massive orchestral score and the very intimate music. It just gives it that extra sort of texture and weight and flavour, almost, I suppose. And again, like in regards to recording the female voice, it's very much carries the lullaby is the voice, and was reportedly recorded by a young Spanish singer who was named Lua in a very simple, intimate style. This choice emphasised the very vulnerable, youthful quality required for the film to sound like a mother singing to a child rather than a grand operatic performance. Like I said, that intimate, childlike, lullaby.
Yeah.
It just really adds to the Ophelia's character and the fantastical realms.
Yeah.
And it just adds that massive contrast to the big orchestral sort of richness.
And I think it even ties in so nicely with Ophelia's relationship with her mother, which I won't go too deep into because it's a very key part of the film.
Absolutely.
But the relationship that she has with her, and even the light that she sees her in, she never describes her mother as like a kind or like caring soul. She always just talks about how pretty she is and how much she cares about her as Ophelia does to her mother, not how much her mother cares about her as a daughter.
Yeah.
But it really is that like kind of seeking comfort but not really getting it until the most dire of situations occurs.
Yeah.
And even then it's not really her mother providing that, but it's the same vibe that's being portrayed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many layers to the music and the film. It's again another masterpiece. We're not going to include crap in our podcast, in our opinion, of course. But the link to that will be in the description.
Yeah.
The soundtrack, go and listen to it. It'd be very, very nice to listen to, depending on what you're doing in the day. But the lullaby would be very nice to listen to if you're studying or working.
Maybe not listen to it late at night because it might be a bit creepy.
It might end up being a bit disturbing,
Yeah.
And if you want the more intense sort of Pale Man sequences or the Captain Vidal's music, do it while you're working out or marching to the corner shop.
Yeah.
Why not? For a cornetto. Give me that cornetto.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So link in the description for that.
Has to be the strawberry cornetto.
It has to be. It's the best one.
Yeah.
So
The nuts and the chocolate one ruin it, in my opinion.
Yeah. As they do.
Yeah.
But
carrying on from the chatty bit of conversation that we got swept off with for the Shivering Soundtracks, we are now going to go into our ghostly gossip for this week.
So as we mentioned a little earlier in the podcast, of a very notorious fairy tale, we thought it'd be a very good idea to include that in the ghostly gossip section. So we have chosen the very, very famous, probably the most notorious fairy tale of them all.
Yeah.
Which is Little Red Riding Hood, and the origins, where it comes from, and perhaps some little details of the original that probably shock a lot of you if you don't know what it actually used to be. So obviously the modern version of Little Red Riding Hood, which was popularised by the Brothers Grimm and Disney specifically, is significantly sanitised, where the original, which was from much older European folktale, which is often referred to as the story of grandmother or Le Conte de la Mégrande, which is a more gruesome and dark story, which revolves around themes of cannibalism and the female cunning. So we just sort of gathered some very disturbing details from the oldest known oral versions of the original Little Red Riding Hood.
Yep. So in the ancient oral versions of the story, the wolf arrives at the grandmother's house, kills her, and then butchers her body. The wolf slices up the grandmother's flesh and stores it in the pantry, or puts it on a platter and actually drains her blood into a bottle, often referred to as the wine that's seen on the table. This is when Little Red Riding Hood arrives, and the wolf, who is now disguised as the grandmother, offers her the meat and the wine. Little Red Riding Hood unknowingly consumes the flesh and the blood of her own grandmother in some tellings. She even remarks on how delicious the meat is, and this act of cannibalism is obviously the darkest element that was removed in the later written versions.
I mean, that's really disturbing in itself and completely different. I mean, I always found Little Red Riding Hood very scary, because obviously the idea is, in modern versions, is that obviously the grandmother was like locked away in the cupboard or the closet, I think it was, and the wolf dressed in the clothing and laid on the bed and tried to lure Little Red Riding Hood over to eat her. But also remember from other versions that, in regards to this really gruesome one, that the wolf actually put the grandma's intestines around the door handle and stuff, and her organs around, which I found was pretty weird.
Did it say why?
I think just to be nasty.
Oh.
Essentially. I think that's how I take it, because that's pretty nasty.
Yeah. Because I've read versions of Little Red Riding Hood where it actually talks about the wolf not wanting to eat the grandmother because she's old. So apparently she doesn't taste as nice as like younger like people and kids.
Yeah.
And so he actually uses her skin as a suit.
That's really that's even worse.
To disguise himself.
To skins her.
Yeah.
Crikey. But obviously, you know, there's the idea of like a ritual of surrender. So like after the meal, the wolf tells the girl, so Little Red Riding Hood, to get into bed with him.
Which nowadays, and probably back then, could have been taken in a multitude of angles.
It probably was written in a certain angle on purpose.
Which is why it's a fable and it's telling you not to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. So the wolf instructs her to strip off all her clothes, so her petticoat, her apron and stockings, etc., and throw them into the fire, symbolising her complete surrender and loss of protection, which again is incredibly disturbing adaptation, an incredibly disturbing story. But again, there's a very interesting ending to the very original, where there wasn't a huntsman who actually came to save Little Red Riding Hood as we sort of know it to be in modern adaptation.
So unlike the later versions that Grimm and Perrault, where they actually added the woodsman or the hunter to save the day, just like Sam mentioned, on this one and most of the older folk tales, they focus solely on the girl's own intelligence and wit as a means of survival. So after noticing how strange her quote-unquote grandmother looked, the girl fabricates an excuse and she tells the wolf that she needs to go outside to relieve herself or to take a shit. It says defecate on here, but she is taking a shit. Then the wolf, not wanting to get out of bed, ties a piece of string to her foot to keep her from escaping, and the clever girl then slips the string off of her foot and ties it around a tree branch or a piece of furniture outside. Don't really know what piece of furniture they would have outside, but
deck chair.
I'm not going to question it. Why would they have a deck chair back in these times?
Might be sunny.
Once the wolf realizes that he has been tricked, she is already running away and thereby saving herself through cunning rather than outside help. The older version served as a stark, visceral cautionary tale, not just about talking to strangers, but about the potential dangers of the woods, predatory men, and the importance of female resourcefulness in the face of absolute danger.
It's really interesting.
Yeah. Obviously, this is a very, very old tale like we've spoken about.
Very, very old.
So men and women and people in general can be predatory. It's not just something that happens or comes from men. So
Absolutely.
Please do keep that in mind. And also, everybody needs to be resourceful. Everybody can be a victim of these things. It's not just about female resourcefulness, as important as it is, because females are taught to not be resourceful from a young age, but it can happen to anybody.
So the whole moral compass, I mean, I think a lot of people, regardless of your gender at the time specifically, would have taken the same moral thing of, I'm not talking to strangers, regardless whether you're a young boy or a young girl.
Yeah.
And it's something that you carry into adulthood. And even nowadays, you know, in modern times, your parents very much say, don't talk to strangers, because the big bad wolf very much exists in different forms nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
So there we go. That's
Also,
a little bit of the origin of Little Red Riding Hood.
If a wolf is talking to you, run the other way.
Do not talk to a wolf.
No.
It's not right. They shouldn't be talking to you.
Yeah.
Go and talk to your dog. Please go and check on your nan.
Yeah.
If she's in a cabin in the woods reading a book in a nightie, tell her to get out.
Maybe don't go and check on your nan, actually, because you don't want to be put in this situation.
Just tell her to get out.
If she's chosen to go to the woods, that's her decision. She's a grown woman.
Yeah.
You leave her in the woods by herself.
Yeah. just assume that she's one of the cunning people that it's describing.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, that's the origins.
And next time you go to visit
Very
her,
grim.
maybe take a couple of dog treats and see how those go down.
Yeah. Dog treats, see if it is a wolf.
Yeah.
She'll start nibbling them up. You're like, yep, cool, yeah. Done.
Keep your chicken bones, hand them over.
Yeah.
Or take 3 little pigs.
There you go. The big bad wolf blows the house down. So there we go.
Maybe that's where he went after he went to Little Red Riding Hood's house.
Perhaps. But yeah, there we go. That is the origins. And we hope you enjoyed that one. Very gruesome, very disgusting,
Very
but
gruesome.
the moral compass is very, very important, especially in nowadays.
100%.
But shedding a little light onto the moral compass leads us very nicely into our spooky spotlight for this week.
For this week's spooky spotlight, we have a very important place to give a little bit of thanks to this time.
Yes.
So, for those of you that are on the planet Earth, Halloween has just passed.
It has.
Unfortunately.
Womp womp. We're
If you
sad.
are in the Bad Boo household, Halloween is all year round.
Yeah, pumpkins, spooky stuff.
Yep.
It's there all the time.
It is up there all the time.
Yeah.
And a place that is particularly known for its spooks and scares and the history that comes along with it.
Very much fantasy angle.
Yep. We have even mentioned in a previous episode.
We did. We mentioned it in the Poltergeist episode,
Mm-hmm.
actually.
We actually went there for Halloween, just in our own spare time.
We did,
And
indeed.
you may have seen a little video on our Instagram about it.
We have, at Bad Brew Productions.
At Bad Boo Productions.
And this place we are speaking of,
Is the one and only
Blackgang Chine,
Blackgang Chine.
which is the UK's oldest theme park, opened in the late 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
Still going today. Very strong, very interesting, and very unique, because it's very, very whimsical and very, very eccentric.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, it's so unique.
Mm-hmm.
But
and it's such an important part of the Isle of Wight and the culture that is here.
it is.
Especially why we mentioned it in our previous episode where we spoke of the ship crash
Yeah, the
that
Clarendon.
happened with the Clarendon and the bits of the ship that are actually still shown.
They are very much still shown.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we just want to say about, you know, if you ever come to the UK, come to the Isle of Wight, please go to Blackgang Chine, give it a visit. Obviously, it's open in like the sort of theme park times, which is like March to, you know, the end of October.
Yeah.
If
If you are going to the end of October one, then they do have the Fiesta of the Dead, which is what me and Sam went to for Halloween this year.
with a couple of our family members,
Mm-hmm.
which is really brilliant there.
It
It's
really
very
is.
much a fantasy angle.
Mhm.
There's like fairyland. It's a family theme park,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a lot of like dark, subtle sort of details in there, and lots of folklore
Mm-hmm.
that are all Isle of Wight specific. So I think that's very much a part of why I'm very interested in like fairy tale
Yeah.
folklore stuff, because I've been going there since I was a kid, and that's when Jodie first came here in the summer
Mm-hmm.
to the Isle of Wight.
It was one of the first places that we visited together.
It was, and yeah, it's a great place, and it's like I said, its sort of fantasy angle is particularly amazing. Like there's folklore, like I say, It's sort of world building and it's sort of thematic angles that it takes and worlds that you sort of enter into, because they're very, very quirky. That's sort of the word that I'll put it. So we just want to shed a little light on such a great little place, and just want to say, go and check it out. It's very much the source of my own interest in the folklore side of things, and we just want to say, go and check it out, and that we just love Blackgang Chine.
And we also wanted to give a thank you to them for reposting our work on TikTok.
Yes, indeed, because when we went to Blackgang, we promoted our Halloween episode online on TikTok. We used some footage of Blackgang Chine and their fantasy walkthroughs.
Which, if you haven't seen it, go and follow us on TikTok at Bad Boo Productions.
Same handle across all the social medias. And yeah, Blackgang Chine actually reposted our videos. They commented on there. So we appreciate it, them putting on their page. So yeah, we just wanted to shed a little bit of light onto the oldest theme park in the UK, which is amazing. So thank you to Blackgang for that.
So whether you want to go and shoot up cowboys in Cowboy Town,
or go and walk through Rumpus Mansion, which allegedly Johnny Depp was going to buy to live in the top of it, which is wild.
It is crazy, but it's a really cool place.
It's very, very creepy. And yeah, just go and check it out if you come to the Isle of Wight. And we'll leave a link in the description to Blackgang Chine's website. We're not sponsored or anything.
And if you are going, you have to ride Extinction.
You have to ride Extinction. If you're going, ride it. It's a 360 sort of gyro swing.
Yeah.
One you sit on like a round sort of circle around the outside, and it sort of swings you upside down. It's right on the side of a cliff, not right on the edge.
No.
But you feel as if you are, because you see the whole sea that goes all the way out to Europe.
And if you go at night time, the sea is dark.
It's very, very
and it's
scary.
really, really cool.
So
it's one of our favourite places in the world.
It is. It means a lot to me, close in my heart. So yeah, link in the description to their website. And yeah.
That leads us to the end of today's episode.
So if you enjoyed tonight's journey through the pages of folklore and fables, don't forget to like, share and subscribe for Bad Boo updates and new episodes, as there's plenty more frights, flicks and folklore to come.
You can also haunt us on socials at Bad Boo Productions, where you can interact and leave comment suggestions for future episodes or contribute to the podcast through polls and posts.
So if you're after more creepy content, then head to our Patreon, which is now live. So if you'd like to hear and even see more of us, then head over there for exclusive Boo Crew videos, stories and live streams.
That's all from us for this enchanted episode today, and we are wishing you a very happy Guy Fawkes night.
I know it was only 2 nights ago, but if you're celebrating on the weekend, then please be safe with the fireworks, because they are very dangerous.
Yep, and keep your dogs inside.
Yep, please think about your animals. Please, please think about the animals, because our lovely little doggy friends and cat friends and fish and nans,
tortoises.
And tortoises, they do not.
And rabbits.
And rabbits. They do not like the lab bangs, so please be considerate.
Keep your animals inside.
Please be considerate. Keep your pets inside.
And pick up your dog poop.
Please pick up the dog poop if
and
you're going around the dragon
Parliament,
tree.
Let us know how it goes.
Yes, let us know. Anyway.
We have been your haunted hosts, Sam and Jodie, unraveling the dark so that you don't have to. And until next time, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, the shadows are never